Guess what? It's Shark Week. Okay, maybe not officially, I don't know what the Discovery Channel has going on this week, but it's Shark Week here at Dispatches from the Forest. Why? Well, because like llamas and alpacas, I had a request to do a program about sharks from one of the places that I do in-person programs here in town. So it just made sense to turn that into a podcast episode too. So just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, we're talking about sharks. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, and this is the Dispatches from the Forest podcast. Sharks have been around a long time. The oldest known fossils of true sharks date back 250 to 300 million years. And even the modern shark orders emerged about 200 million years ago. But what exactly is a shark? Well, it's a fish, but more specifically, it's an elasmobranch or cartilaginous fish as opposed to an osteichthyes or bony fish. Yeah, okay, great. What does that mean? Well, it means that their skeletons are composed primarily of cartilage as opposed to bone tissue. Cartilage is flexible, durable, and about half the density of bone, which makes sharks lighter than other fish their same size and reduces the amount of energy that they need to swim. It's interesting to note that sharks don't have a rib cage, and they would be crushed under their own weight outside of the water. Now, a shark's upper jaw is not fused to its cranium. Think about how your upper jaw is part of the rest of your skull. A shark's jaws are more like one of those sets of chattering teeth that you wind up and it hops around, disconnected from the rest of the skull. So a shark's jaws are exposed to much greater physical stresses than its vertebrae or its gill arches, which are the closest thing a shark has to a rib cage. And so the jaws need to be made of stronger stuff. Sharks' jaws are made up of tiny hexagonal plates called tesserae, which are crystal blocks of calcium salts arranged in a mosaic. So kind of like bone, but not bone. This structure makes these areas nearly as strong as the bony tissue found in other animals, though. Generally, sharks only have one layer of these tesserae, but the jaws of larger species can have 2 layers or even more. For example, the jaws of a large great white shark can have up to 5 layers. Sharks are found in all of the seas of the world. Now, there are a few species, like river sharks and bull sharks, that can sometimes be found in brackish water or even fresh water. They'll sometimes travel long distances up rivers. In 2019, 2 Illinois fishermen caught a large bull shark in the Mississippi River, 1,700 miles north of the Gulf of Mexico. But despite the ability to live in fresh water, in most cases that's not a shark's preference. The exception to that rule is the Ganges shark, which is the only species of shark that lives exclusively in fresh water. Now, as for the depths where sharks can be found, they're commonly found from shallow water down to depths of 7,000 feet or 2,000 meters, and sometimes even deeper. But they're almost entirely absent below 10,000 feet or 3,000 meters in depth. Almost. The deepest confirmed report of a shark, alive and well, was a Portuguese dogfish that was found at a whopping 12,100 feet or 3,700 meters. Now, we often think of sharks as solitary hunters, ranging the oceans in search of food, but this only applies to a few species. Most sharks are much more social, and it's thought that they have their own distinct personalities. But even solitary sharks meet for breeding or at rich hunting grounds, swimming thousands of miles in a year. In fact, shark migration patterns are even more complex than bird migration patterns, and many sharks will cover entire ocean basins. But if there's one constant with sharks, it's that they display the whole range of variability, including size. The smallest shark in the world is the dwarf lantern shark, a deep-sea dwelling species that, fully grown, maxes out at less than 7 inches. On the other end of the spectrum is the whale shark, not just the largest shark in the world, but the largest fish in the world, and it can reach a length of 40 feet or 12 meters. But there's over 500 species of shark in the world, and only one of them is an omnivore. The bonnethead shark, a type of hammerhead, eats large amounts of seagrass, the only known case of a plant-eating shark. The rest of the sharks are obligate carnivores, although there's still a significant amount of variation in their preferred prey and hunting techniques. Many sharks are cooperative feeders, hunting in packs to herd and capture elusive prey. Now, this can lead to the phenomenon known as a feeding frenzy, when the sharks go kind of crazy, biting anything that moves in biting range, including each other. But a feeding frenzy is less a sort of blind bloodlust, which is how it's often portrayed, and more about competition between large predators, with each shark trying to get something to eat before it's all gone. Some seabed-dwelling sharks are more solitary, and they're highly effective ambush predators, using camouflage and lying in wait to suck prey into their mouths. Okay, now a word about shark digestion. The intestines of a shark are much shorter than those of mammals, but evolution has compensated for this problem by having a structure called a spiral or scroll valve inside the intestine to increase the absorbent surface area. By keeping digestible material in the intestines longer, they can maximize nutrient absorption. For this reason, many sharks actually don't feed very frequently. The drawback to the spiral valve is that sharks can't pass large, hard objects, like bones, through their lower intestine. These objects either stay in the stomach until they're broken down enough to pass out, or they're regurgitated. Undigestible items may never get past the stomach because the shark either vomits or turns its stomach inside out, basically puking its whole stomach out of its mouth so it can rinse it off, ejecting the unwanted item, a process known as gastric eversion. The shape of a particular shark species' teeth depends on its diet. Sharks that feed primarily on fish have needle-like teeth to help them grip their prey. Those that feed on larger prey, like mammals, have pointed lower teeth for gripping and triangular upper teeth with serrated edges for cutting. Sharks whose diet consists primarily of mollusks and crustaceans have dense, flattened teeth, a lot like our molars that are used for crushing. The teeth of plankton eaters, like basking sharks and whale sharks, are small and pretty much non-functional. These sharks have gill rakers, which are long, slender filaments that form a very efficient sieve, similar to the baleen plates of the great whales. The shark traps plankton in these filaments and swallows from time to time in huge gulps. But even these sharks have independently evolved different strategies for filter feeding plankton. Basking sharks practice what's called ram feeding, swimming with their mouths open to catch prey. Whale sharks use suction to take in plankton and small fish, and megamouth sharks make suction feeding even more efficient by using luminescent tissue inside of their mouths to attract prey in the darkness of the deep ocean. Other highly specialized feeders include cookie cutter sharks, which feed on flesh sliced out of other large fish or marine mammals. The teeth of the cookie cutter shark are enormous compared to the size of its body, and the lower teeth are particularly sharp. They've never actually been observed feeding, but it's thought that they latch onto their prey using their thick lips to make a seal and then twist their bodies to rip off flesh. But here's the other interesting thing about shark teeth. Instead of being rooted in the jaw, like, say, your teeth, shark teeth are embedded in the gums, and they're constantly replaced throughout the shark's lifetime. Multiple rows of replacement teeth grow in a groove on the inside of the jaw and steadily move forward like a conveyor belt. Some sharks can lose and replace 30,000 teeth or more in their lifetime. The rate of tooth replacement varies by species. Some replace a tooth every 8 to 10 days, while in other species it may be on the order of every several months. In most species, teeth are replaced one at a time, but cookie cutter sharks replace an entire row in one go. Now, we usually think of fish as having scales, and sharks are no different, except that their scales don't really look like scales. Sharks have a covering of what's called dermal denticles, modified tooth-like scales that protect their skin from damage and parasites and improves their fluid dynamics. Their scales are supported by spines, which feel rough, kind of like sandpaper if you were to stroke them backwards. But when they're flattened by the forward movement of the shark through the water, it creates tiny vortices that reduce hydrodynamic drag and turbulence, making swimming both more efficient and quieter compared to bony fishes. Okay, let's talk about tails. The shape of a shark's tail varies considerably between shark species, thanks to their evolution in different environments. Now, sharks have what's called a heterocercal tail fin, which is a fancy word that means that the top part of the tail is usually noticeably larger than the bottom part. Now, this is because the shark's vertebral column extends into that top part of the tail, providing a greater surface area for muscle attachment. Tiger sharks have a large upper lobe, and that helps them both cruise slowly and put on sudden bursts of speed when they need it. The tail of the porbeagle shark, which hunts schooling fish like mackerel and herring, has more equally sized upper and lower lobes, and this helps them keep pace with their fast-swimming prey. Other sharks have other tail adaptations, some that help them catch prey more directly. For example, the thresher shark's tail has an extremely long upper lobe, and it uses it to stun fish and squid. But whatever the tail shape, sharks are fast, smooth swimmers. Average cruising speed for a shark is about 5 miles an hour, or 8 kilometers per hour, but when feeding, startled, or attacking, they can hit bursts up to 12 miles an hour, or 19 kilometers an hour. The fastest shark, though, and indeed one of the fastest fishes in the ocean, is the short-fin mako shark, which can accelerate to over 30 miles an hour. Now, bony fish have gas-filled swim bladders for buoyancy, but sharks don't have those. Instead, sharks have a large oil-filled liver, which, combined with their lightweight skeleton, keeps them buoyant. The liver can account for up to 30% of their body mass, but the liver's effectiveness is kind of limited, so sharks have other methods of maintaining their depth. Their pectoral fins provide dynamic lift, a lot like the flaps on an airplane wing, directing them up or down. Sand tiger sharks store air in their stomachs, using it as a form of swim bladder. Bottom-dwelling sharks like nurse sharks are negatively buoyant. They sink down and rest on the ocean floor. Like other fish, sharks extract oxygen from seawater as it passes over their gills. Unlike other fish, a shark's gill slits are not covered, but lie in a row behind the head. In most species, there's a modified slit called a spiracle that lies just behind the eye. The spiracle helps the shark take in water during respiration, and it plays a major role in bottom-dwelling sharks, helping pump water over the gills. But spiracles are reduced or missing in some sharks. While the shark is moving, water passes through the mouth and over the gills in a process known as ram ventilation. A small number of species have lost the ability to pump water over their gills and must swim constantly without rest. These species are obligate ram ventilators and would asphyxiate if they were unable to move. Now, most sharks are cold-blooded, but again, there are exceptions. Some, particularly those that are faster swimmers, are warm-blooded and maintain a higher body temperature than the surrounding water. In these sharks, a strip of aerobic red muscle located near the center of the body generates heat, which the body retains using a countercurrent exchange mechanism. Arteries going out to the extremities are intertwined with returning blood vessels to help warm up the returning blood. Larger species like whale sharks maintain their temperature through sheer size when diving into deeper, colder water. The scalloped hammerhead helps stay warm by closing its mouth and gills when diving deep, holding its breath, something you never think about a fish doing until it returns to warmer water. All right, let's talk about shark senses. We'll start with hearing. Now, it's hard to test a shark's hearing, but it's thought that they may have a sharp sense of hearing and can possibly hear prey from many miles away. The hearing sensitivity for most shark species is between 20 and 1,000 hertz. Now, Just for reference, here's 150 hertz tone, which is the lowest I could get and still be able to hear it on my computer. And here's 1000 hertz. Now, just for reference, the human range of hearing is between 20 and 20,000 hertz. So sharks have a much narrower frequency range, but much more sensitive hearing. A small opening on each side of the shark's head leads directly into the inner ear through a thin channel. Now, kind of related to hearing is another structure, one that's found in most fish called the lateral line. The lateral line consists of canals that run along each side of a fish's body, connecting rows of pores in the skin and scales to the water outside the body. Sense organs called neuromasts are positioned both at intervals along the canals and on the surface of the body. Neuromasts are cells similar to the hair cells found in the inner ear of other vertebrates, but in fish, they interact with the surrounding aquatic environment. The lateral line helps sharks distinguish between the currents around them, obstacles on their periphery, and struggling prey that are out of visual view. In sharks, the lateral line is most sensitive to frequencies in the range of 25 to 50 hertz. When it comes to vision, shark eyes are similar to the eyes of other vertebrates, with similar lenses, corneas, and retinas. Many sharks can contract and dilate their pupils, like humans, something that most other fish can't do. Sharks have eyelids too, but they don't blink because the surrounding water cleans their eyes. But some species do have nictitating membranes, a second set of translucent eyelids that cover and protect the eyes when they're hunting or if the shark is being attacked. However, some species, including the great white shark, don't even have nictitating membranes. Instead, they roll their eyes backwards into their head to protect them when they're striking prey. Sharks also have a tapetum lucidum, the reflective layer at the back of the eye found in many nocturnal animals. I've talked about the tapetum lucidum before on the podcast. It's what makes an animal's eyes reflect back at you when you hit them with headlights or a flashlight or a camera flash. The effectiveness of the tapetum lucidum in sharks varies, with some sharks having stronger nocturnal adaptations. Unsurprisingly, shark species that tend to be found in deeper or murkier environments where there's less light have a more effective tapetum lucidum. Now, a lot of sharks have only rod photoreceptors and no cone cells in their retinas, which gives them great night vision, but it also makes them colorblind. Other species of shark have, in addition to rods, only a single type of cone photoreceptor, sensitive to green wavelengths. But again, seeing in only shades of gray and green, they're pretty much effectively colorblind. Studies of shark vision show that it's an object's contrast against the background rather than its color that's more important for object detection. Sharks have an excellent sense of smell. They're able to detect as little as 1 part per million of blood in seawater. The size of their olfactory bulb varies across different shark species too. Unsurprisingly, the size depends on how much a particular species relies on smell versus vision to find prey. Shark species in low visibility environments like deep water generally have larger olfactory bulbs, but sharks that inhabit reefs where visibility is high have smaller olfactory bulbs. What's really interesting though is that sharks can determine the direction of a given scent based on when the scent reaches each nostril. Hammerheads are especially good at this because their nostrils are much farther apart. Some bottom-dwelling species, like nurse sharks, also have barbels, whiskers like a catfish, which are effectively part of the olfactory system and help them detect prey. In general, and in addition to blood, sharks are attracted to the chemicals found in the intestines of many species, and as a result, they can often be found lingering near or in sewage outfalls. So we've covered hearing, sight, and smell, but we're not quite done with shark senses yet. Sharks have organs called the ampulle of Lorenzini, which are electroreceptor organs. They number in the hundreds of thousands, and these organs detect the electromagnetic field that all living things produce. While there are other animals that have electroreceptors, Sharks have the greatest electrical sensitivity of any animal on the planet. Now, it's fairly obvious that this would help sharks find prey, but it also does something else. Ocean currents moving in the Earth's magnetic field also generate electric fields, so the sharks can use those electrical fields for orientation and navigation. Remember those complex migration patterns I mentioned? Now, when it comes to reproduction, all animals fall into one of three categories, I think all of which I've talked about on the podcast before: viviparous, oviparous, and ovoviviparous. Now, don't worry if you don't remember what those all mean, because there are shark species that fall into every one of those categories, so we are about to review. Most sharks are ovoviviparous. That means that the young develop in eggs, but the eggs are held in the oviduct inside the mother's body. The eggs hatch in the oviduct, and the embryos are nourished by the remnants of the egg yolk, along with fluids that are secreted by glands in the oviduct. The young are born alive and fully functional. Ovoviviparous sharks will give birth in sheltered areas like bays or river mouths or shallow reefs. These areas are more protected from predators, primarily other sharks, and also tend to provide an abundance of food. But there are sharks that are viviparous. Viviparity is the gestation of young without the use of a traditional egg and results in a live birth. Humans are viviparous. Again, the young are born fully formed and self-sufficient. And then there are sharks that are oviparous, laying eggs in a leathery egg case known as a mermaid's purse because, well, it kind of looks like a purse. These egg cases may be corkscrewed into crevices to help protect them. Now, your average shark has a lifespan of 20 to 30 years, but here again, sharks show a great deal of variation depending on the species. Great white sharks can live to be 70 years or more. Whale sharks and spiny dogfish have a lifespan closer to 100 years. But the Greenland shark is the record holder. One individual was estimated to be at least 272 years old, possibly over 500 years old. The estimate they gave was 392 plus or minus 120 years, so a little bit of a range of error there. But even the low end of that, 272 years, makes this the longest-lived vertebrate known on the planet. Okay, let's talk about shark attacks on humans. Worldwide, between 2019 and 2023, there was an average of 64 unprovoked shark attacks. That number was actually down in 2024. Only 47 unprovoked attacks occurred that year, 7 of which were fatal. And typically, about 60% of shark attacks happen in the United States. And about half of those, 30% of the worldwide total, happen in Florida. But while all sharks get a bad reputation, only 4 out of the more than 500 species have been involved in a significant number of fatal, unprovoked attacks. In general, sharks don't show a pattern of attacking humans specifically. They seem to prefer the blood of fish and other common prey. Research indicates that when humans do become the victim of an unprovoked shark attack, it's probably because the shark has mistaken them for one of their more typical prey, like a seal. But to really put shark attacks in perspective, and at the risk of making you unreasonably afraid of something else, the odds of drowning or meeting some other untimely fate at the beach are somewhere between 1 in 2 to 3.5 million, whereas the odds of a shark attack are 1 in 11.5 million. So, my feral friends, go to the beach and don't be afraid to go in the water. And that's where we end today's episode. If you'd like to support the podcast, there are several ways to do that. You can become a patron. To become a patron, direct your browser over to patreon.com/dispatchesfromtheforest. Subscriptions start at just $5 a month, and with 3 paid months, you get some sweet Dispatches from the Forest merch. If you'd like to make a one-time donation, you can do that through PayPal using my email address, dispatchesfromtheforest@gmail.com, which, as an email address, is also where you can email me with questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes. You can also donate using the Cash App and the hashtag ForestNerd. Check out the merch store at cafepress.com/shop/dispatches from the forest. Click on products and you'll see all the fun stuff we have over there. Finally, follow Dispatches from the Forest on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, reminding you to go outside and get dirty. The Dispatches from the Forest podcast is a production of Dispatches from the Forest, may not be used or rebroadcast whole or in part without express written permission.